Testing 1 2. Okay. Everybody can hear me, just making sure. What's happening, everybody? Just making sure everybody can hear me. If anyone can type yes in the chat saying you can hear me, if that's cool. What's going on, Luciano, Sam? Hope everyone's doing good. Crystal. Nice, nice. Mic check, 1 2. Making sure it's okay. The second I see someone put in the chat that it's good to go. Okay, cool, cool. Thank you. Sweet, sweet, sweet. All right, all right. So, because of a little bit of a time limit, nothing too crazy. I'm trying to cap myself out at 2 hours here. There's a lot to look at. So, but because of that, I'm not going to be doing any gaming today. I just, Crystal Anderson. There we go. The 6, nice. Layla, Luciano. Just want to make sure. Dominic, awesome, awesome. Jessica, aloha. How's it going? Sweet. Just Dan, Dwayne. Let's see here. Just making sure I didn't miss anybody. Matthias. Very nice. Okay, Tiny Cat. Awesome, awesome. So for those that haven't come in yet or that will come in later and you start watching this from the beginning, I say welcome to all of you. We will not be doing any gaming today simply because I feel like what we need to cover is going to take more than probably an hour, hour and a half, and there's so much to delve into and explore with you guys that I think the next stream we'll finish off with something a little more relaxing. But anyways, let's get into this. So the 31 planes of existence, making parallels to Eric Davis's advanced propulsion report and ELVES, but not only ELVES, but believe it or not, I didn't think that I was actually going to delve into this today, but yes, reptilians, but more so the something called the R complex. So first let's go into the 31 planes of existence, and we're going to see how that overall in general connects to everything here in total, and how that sort of comes full circle, if you will. So let me just make sure we're good to go. Okay, so in this context, existence means life or living. Planes means realms, levels, or worlds or places. In Pali, the word loka is a near equivalent, as the English language does not have an exact translation. I like how it starts off with this already, and I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't even really like pre-read any of this, so to speak. I just know that it was spoken of so avidly. But anyways, let's see here. In Pali, the word loka is a near equivalent, as the English language does not have an exact translation. We can say that these realms are as much places as they are mental states. For example, if your mind is evil, nasty, or unwholesome, and you are constantly following your mind's will, then you are already living in the realm of hell. Furthermore, if you perform such unwholesome actions again and again without fear, and without being mindful of the results, let's zoom in a little bit more, you will be reborn in a place of suffering, a hell realm. If you are honest, virtuous, and your mind is pure, and you constantly practice the wholesome acts of dana, sila, and bhavana, which is meditation to develop your purity, then you are living in a heavenly state and are sure to be reborn in a clean, beautiful, and pure place, a heavenly realm, or even attain nibbana. This cosmology and natural law applies to all beings and not just Buddhists. Now, I want to point out, by the way, folks, we're going to be taking a lot more of a both an esoteric and nuts and bolts approach to this, but one thing right off the bat I already wonder is, depending on the origination of this text relative to the time in which Earth and the solar system, at least our solar system, was placed in some type of trap, if you want to call it, whether that trap is more mental or whether that trap is more physical or both is hard to say. But I wonder, because again, assuming this was not written in mind with the respects of there being some type of like energetic fence put around us. But anyways, let's see. For such laws or dhamma are not inventions of the Buddha, but are natural and rediscovered by him when he became enlightened under the Bodhi tree. Now, I know this might seem a little bit, I guess you could say, stale or boring compared to the stuff we normally look at, but I promise we're building up to something really good here. So, one thing that we should remember is that all beings without exception living in the different realms are impermanent. They do not live forever. Some beings in the heavens can live for aeons, but once they die in one realm, they will be reborn as another being in another realm unless they obtain nibbana, which means that they do not have to suffer or be reborn in any of these realms. They have achieved non-existence. Now, I wonder again if that concept of being reborn is confined to the trap in which we are allegedly in, and I don't want to use the word trap. I don't want to overly state something that may seem a little bit too direct. That's not the point here, again, just because I don't really have any other term I can think of off the top of my head. The inexplicable law of karma guarantees that each and every one of our actions, I would imagine this would apply as to the word karma as well, probably same thing, whether it be of body, speech, or mind, has consequences in line with the skillfulness or otherwise of that action. We can often witness this process or firsthand in our lives. The effects may not be immediately apparent, but the Buddha also taught that our actions have effects that extend far beyond our present life, determining the quality of rebirth after death. Act in wholesome skillful ways, and you are destined for a favorable rebirth. Act in unwholesome, unskillful ways, and an unpleasant rebirth awaits. In our ignorance, we stumble for eons through samsara, propelled from one birth to the next by the quality of our choices and our actions, not knowing where we shall end up next, and unconsciously clinging to and craving for a better existence, as if blindfolded to join a speeding bullet train taking us to a destination we not know where. Compare this to a flock of chickens on the farm, happily scrounging for food, oblivious of the fact that at any time, one or any of its number will be picked up and slaughtered. The suttas describe 31 distinct planes or realms of existence into which beings can be reborn during their long wandering through samsara. Now, I want to say I'm not certain if this samsara, as this wandering through samsara, as I highlight here, is reminiscent of that of fractal cosmology, assuming there would not be some type of confined trap, let me not use that word, energetic barrier, let me say, placed around the earth allegedly, regardless of which frequency it's vibrating at, or if it's, again, confined within earth. I'd like to think, this could be my confirmation bias, that, again, this is something that is speaking to even, like, far beyond even our solar system, so to speak, but these range from the extraordinarily dark, grim, and painful hell realms all the way up to the most sublime, refined, and exquisitely blissful heavenly realms. I wonder again, these more blissful heavenly realms, if they're attainable to be reached with, say, I don't know, nuts and bolts technology, that would again manifest what we allegedly as humans can actually create if we were to be, again, quote-unquote ascended. I don't really like to use that term so avidly, but to our most highest potential. So we see here, existence in every realm is impermanent. In the cosmology taught by the Buddha, there is no eternal heaven or hell. Beings are born into a particular realm according to both their past karma and their karma at the moment of death. Karma. When the karmic force that propelled them to that realm is finally exhausted, they pass away, taking rebirth once again elsewhere according to their karma. And so the wearisome cycle continues on and on into the deepest recesses of infinity. In these 31 planes, by the way, I want to say, continues on and on into the deepest recesses of infinity. I cannot help but think of this right over here. I cannot help but think of the toroid field. The concept of, I guess you could say, never ending, but also constantly ending. And what I mean by that essentially is that, again, not to be overly confusing, but apparently when these ETs speak to our leaders, our human leaders, they talk about how in quantum physics, everything is happening at once, but also it's not simultaneously, which is what we can attribute to what has been called, at least in modern human history, chaos magic, so to speak, which we can then relate to entropy in physics. But point being is that if we take a look at the way in which the toroid field seems to fluctuate, it seems to show that there's some form of sovereignty within us that has been removed, if you want to call it, and maybe nothing even reached in metaphorically or physically to remove it from us. We did it to ourselves by fueling something that was inverted. This is just, I'm just throwing ideas out. I'm not saying I'm correct. I'm not saying, that this is the end all be all, so to speak, but I just find it quite peculiar, if you want to call it, that when we look at things like this, there's that constant fluctuation of things are constantly being built but destroyed at the same time. The best example I could probably give is think about the cherry of a cigar or a cigarette. It's burning, but at the same time, it's lighting itself, but it's also shortening in length too. It's doing two things at once, if that makes sense, so to speak, right? It's allowing you to smoke it while also decreasing in size. So now let's head to, again, this is page number 76. Just for the sake of those watching, just to show you, this is, please forgive me, let's just go back to page 1, Eric Davis's Advanced Propulsion Study. This is different, keep in mind, from the Stargate report. I just want to point that out. So there's a lot to relate to and cover here. But first, let's go to page 76. We see here that Mr. Davis discusses the Levi-Civita effect. Let's zoom in a little bit, and you'll see how... hold on one second. You'll see how this correlates back to the 31 planes of existence. So what we have here is the Alcubierre warp drive effect, and then the Levi-Civita effect. So the Alcubierre in 1994 derived a space-time metric that induces a bubble-shaped geometry surrounding a spacecraft, which uniquely allows for FTL, which is faster than light motion through space without violating the special theory of relativity. A thin shell of negative energy, which again, for those that are members on the Patreon, you'll know that I've recently said, replace the term negative energy everywhere you see it with the word exotic. Just that form of perception and how one views things changes the whole perspective of things. Even if you don't notice it right away, you'll notice over time, the more you refer to it even in your own mind as exotic energy instead of negative, indicates there's something else out there, referring to what has been alleged as hyperspatial dimensions, that when we looked at the stream from about a month ago from James Maxwell, who again back in the mid to late 1800s had discovered that, although I'm sure he's not the first human to have done that, but at least in modern human history he might have been, and then all of a sudden it was butchered to the point where no, there's only 3 dimensions, there's only 3, don't worry about that. Point being, we see here exotic energy referring to forms or states of mass energy that violate general relativity energy condition theorems, which are now invalid, must be distributed around the spacecraft in order to generate the warp bubble geometry. Okay, now this is nothing new, right? I know that this is, again, we've talked about this even like a year ago at this point on the show. Point being, let's go to this website that I like to use now, a sketchpad, so to speak. And, okay, sorry, that was something totally different. Let's create this. So it talks about how, again, let's say this triangle, and I'm going to put C here. Let's say this is the craft, right? It's talking about how the craft would have to create within the space-time grid, I'm going to use blue here, a bubble or energy field around it that voids itself of space and time. So it's moving, but it's also not. It depends on the context that you're viewing it in. The point here, folks, that I want to point out very significantly is that it seems that this energy bubble would have to come from, of course, some type of source or sources from within the craft, I would assume, or presume rather. And what happens is that if you notice the distribution of the energy seems to create around it, again, I'm careful in saying this, but a mini, I don't want to say universe, but a mini, I don't even want to use the word dead, but a mini void representation of the universe, rather. Why do I say that? Because if the energy is coming from the center of the craft, what it's doing is disseminating itself via that of its propulsion system, even though I say propulsion carefully, because to the traditional view of it, it doesn't have one, but you know what I mean. In the way in which fractal cosmology seems to describe the universe, everything within this force field is a fractal of the power source. Why would that be any different with us? I'm just exploring ideas, guys. I'm just, I could be wrong, but anyways. Now that would be the warp bubble geometry. So we'll find here the Levi-Civita effect. Consider the possibility of generating a uniform static magnetic or electrical field possessing cylindrical symmetry to create an artificial gravitational field in accordance with general relativity, which is GR. Okay, what's interesting here, there's a lot to focus on here, guys, because what we'll notice, we can pick a lot from this paragraph. We'll see here that generating a uniform static or electric field possessing cylindrical symmetry. Hasn't there been a significant amount of new studies and reports? And I'm not trying to discredit nor disrespect any of the scientists or professors studying this on the surface. I have tremendous respect for your work. However, again, we have to consider the the alleged possibility that there may be knowledge and certain silos are holding that knowledge over other silos, if you will. It may not even be knowledge, thanks to a friend of mine. It could be both knowledge, but also an interaction of sorts that electromagnetically, I know this might sound silly, but you'll see why I bring this up. This isn't coming out of nowhere. Zaps that ability of that we I don't want to say have had removed from us, but have had, I guess you could say, voided from us back into the pineal gland and aligning to that of the chakras. Because what's interesting is that if we take a look, give me one quick second, guys, so right over here, what we'll find is that, again, this is sort of the anatomy of the human body, if you will, right? Now, what we'll see here is, again, the energy fields projecting outward around the body, which seems to be reminiscent, by the way, of, again, notice, the toroid field, but okay, I digress. We see here the double helix of the serpent, right? Okay, then we can relate that to the reptilians, but let's put that to the side for a second. And we see within the double helix a straight line going right through. Okay, now we can also say, by the way, that this is the Naga, thanks to our great friend of the show, Michael, for bringing this up to me even like a year before I even knew about it. But the Naga, representing and encompassing entrapment of the soul complex, if you will, or scalping the soul of sorts. But the point I'm trying to make here is that what you have within this double helix representation is that, you see this straight line right here, guys? This seems to be representative of when the chakras are aligning and when you are at full, I guess you could say, peace with yourself. And one way in which that would be possible would be to not allow any external thoughts to come into your mind, whether mentally or, through your ears, or allow any thoughts of your own to project externally. All right, and that's what happens when the alignment is perfectly, I guess you could say, perfectly symmetrical. Now, when we look also at graphene, nanobots, nanomaterials, we see, for example, that geometry and symmetry, I should have pulled up, actually, let me see if I could, but geometry and symmetry, as a matter of fact, seem to have something to do with activating one form of energy amongst God knows how many, right? And I substantiate this with, if I'm not mistaken, when Hal Puthoff and Eric Weinstein with Jesse Michaels' video there were talking about, again, the issues with, quantum entanglement and things like this. I'm not pretending to know even remotely close to what those guys know. But the point I'm trying to make is that there was one part of the interview where I believe Mr. Weinstein had said, yes, but how? Then you have the issue with, chaos and, you have all these unexpected variables that come into play and things like this. And Hal Puthoff said, he goes, well, then you have, I believe he goes, I think something along the lines of symmetrical Lorentz covariance, which is very, again, I don't even, to be honest with you folks, the point is to not even look into any of that. It's to ultimately understand it in a way that gradually works us towards noticing that this right here, sacred geometry, if you will, seems to hold some type of magnetic activation naturally, which would explain why it was dismissed. It has been dismissed. Even today, it's still dismissed, that there's a magnetic spectrum. You know how we have a light spectrum? It was proposed God knows how long ago we have a magnetic spectrum. But if that were to be accepted or explored, if you will, that would open the door to stuff like this, which is what they didn't want. And when I say they, we're speaking of, again, the keepers of secrets of knowledge, not just within the West, but transatlantically, excuse me. But what we see ultimately as well is that we see now almost as if someone gave the green light at the top of academia, within the UK, within the US, within Russia. I mean, Russia's kind of been doing their own thing, to be fair, but they've given the green light in terms of, all of a sudden, all these research papers now can come out talking about how symmetry and geometries of that type of symmetry can activate some type of magnetic manifestation that a lot of physicists are calling physical realism, which is something that is there, but they can't explain because their basic tools of measurement cannot substantiate the extent into which that energy force is there. Because, again, there's nothing to measure it with by definition at the moment, at least. Anyways, what we'll see here is that Levi Civita considered in 1917, again, Just to show you, like, it's not like this is anything new per se with respect to at least the ideas of it. Considered the possibility of generating a uniform static magnetic or electric field possessing cylindrical symmetry to create an artificial gravitational field in accordance with GR, which is general relativity. The author, Eric Davis, in 1998-1999, showed that Levi-Civita's space-time metric describes a spatial hypercylinder with a position dependent on gravitational potential. The geometry is interesting from the standpoint that it describes a unique cylindrically shaped trapped space. The author Eric Davis, further showed that the magnetic field strength would have to be, and I'm not even going to pretend like I know what this is, Tesla, in order to induce a space-time curvature, a geometrical measure of gravitational potential. Okay, where this is when we need our great friend of the show, Alexei Novitsky, the astrophysicist, to come on and explain to me what this is. But anyways, a pulsed power field generator could be used to generate an electric or magnetic field driven propulsion. Pudov in 2004, Pudov et al. 2004, studied the Levi-Civita effect within the context of the PV. We have here PV, please forgive me, the PV general relativity model. They showed how the perturbation of the space-time metric by the presence of uniform static magnetic and electric fields can be understood as a perturbation of the effective refractive index of the vacuum. Okay, now this is going to sound confusing, but please let me finish the sentence and I'll explain to you exactly what I think they're saying here. And summarized in terms of its effect on the propagation of a light ray through the region containing the fields. If the PVGR model is correct, then modifying the vacuum index of refraction using electric or magnetic fields could induce a unique form of propulsion. A dedicated research program will be necessary to develop and mature this propulsion concept. Okay, now when we take a look here, for example, this sentence stands out to me right over here. They showed how the perturbation of the space-time metric by the presence of uniform static magnetic and electric fields can be understood as a perturbation of the effective refractive index of the vacuum, and summarized in terms of its effect on the propagation of a light ray through the region containing the fields. This, folks, personally reminds me of what's called the R complex. But let me, 1 second, hold on, let me see, here we go. This from chapter 2. This is not going to be a reptilian, if you want to call it, episode or stream, if you want to call it that. But again, we have to factor in what the evidence seems to substantiate. But also, to be fair, for those watching later on, this could be incorrect. So please, I encourage you very kindly to keep an open mind. But let's take a look. Bibliothecaplates.legge.net, a great indexing website. Quote, "Don't mention the reptiles." All right. So we see here. Hold on 1 second. The famed British astrophysicist, we'll see here, this is the highlighted part, Fred Hoyle, told a London press conference as long ago as 1971 that the world was controlled by a force which could manifest in many forms. And I quote, "They are everywhere," he told astonished journalists, "in the sky, in the sea, and on earth." He said that they controlled humanity through the mind. I know this sounds utterly bizarre, but you need to read the whole of The Biggest Secret, which is, I think, the title of the book, to see the wealth of evidence to support this. If you pull out now or after a couple of chapters because your belief system is in overload, that's your choice, but you will miss the opportunity to see that the almost hysterically unbelievable is actually true. Okay, so then we've read this paragraph, right? Before we go on, because there's actually these two next paragraphs I wanted to read as well. I cannot help but think, this part right here, he said, we're talking about the famed British astrophysicist Fred Hoyle, again, which would substantiate Rudolf Steiner's work, but we see here, he said that they controlled humanity through the mind. Okay, now interestingly enough, if we go back to Eric Davis's report, it talks about creating that electromagnetic field around a craft using an effective refractive index of the vacuum. its summary in terms of its propagation of a light ray through the region containing those specified fields. This A reminds me of Dan Winter's work, but not only that, B reminds me of, if I'm not mistaken, please forgive me, Mr. Nowitzki, the astrophysicist who's been on the show both publicly and on the member side, if I'm taking your words out of context here, but I believe he had a theory which entailed the concept of how the reason, or why the reasons ghosts, if you will, as we know them, cannot leave certain properties is because they can only go as far as the baseline of their shadow propagation allows it. Literally their shadow. Because Einstein allegedly never figured out if anything could be faster than the speed of light, or what was faster than the speed of light, anything of the sort. I think he did secretly, it was just never revealed, which would fall in line perfectly with the chronological timing of how these secret government programs started up and all of that. But the point being is that light may in fact be the core reason, or the core tool of trickery amongst us. It's not for me to say if these are full-on shape-shifting reptilians or anything of the sort, although I am more and more often inclined to believe that is one amongst many different species that are here. Point being, let's carry on. We see here now the visual of, again, inside the bubble. Okay, this is this grid representing space and time. So this, again, we've covered this quite avidly, actually, for a very long time. Then, of course, we have the concept of traversable wormholes. Okay, now what's interesting here is that wormholes can possess normal or backwards, in special cases time flow, normal or non-existent gravitational stresses on space travelers, and their entry-exit points, or their throats as it's called, can be spherically shaped, cubic shaped, polyhedral shaped, or generic shaped. A byproduct of wormhole studies has been the development of wormholes possessing flat entry or exit openings. This is essentially a true Stargate, or a flat doorway portal through space-time and space dimensions. A thin shell of negative energy. I like how Mr. Davis puts exotic in brackets. Let's think about that pertaining to the perception of our own individual minds. A thin shell of exotic energy, I'll say, must be distributed locally in order to generate the wormhole geometry. Locally. Okay? Now, again, going back to the sketch pad. The concept of fractal cosmology, starting from a source and then equally dispersing. And if there's even one little unequivocal amount of energy that is a little bit more dense than the other, and I'm only using those words because I can't think of anything else at the time, I would dare to say that would be the case. Now, let's head on back to this right over here. The more I weave together incredible amounts of information, the more it seems to me that we are talking of two distinct situations running side by side. There were other extraterrestrial races at large on the Earth, and still are, as well as the ET race with the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, and other ancient texts called the Serpent Race. Again, the Serpent Race, truly, folks, I cannot help but think, the serpent, the Naga, the Nag Hammadi, whatever you would like to refer to it as. Now, let's see here, the Serpent Race. It could well have been that some of the others went to war with this reptilian Anunnaki. Again, I'd like to be very vigilant of the naming of said alleged species. I'm not trying to, instill a particular word or label into your mind. I really want you guys to, as do I, think as openly as possible. Ancient texts record these war of the gods all over the world, and these could include conflicts between different ET races, as well as those described in the Sumerian tablets that appeared to involve Anunnaki factions fighting with each other. Okay, there's something I'd like to show you, folks. I'm actually going to pull this up on my, we'll see here, personal, my email here. All right, take a look at this right here, guys. Again, this is from the New York Times, 1919. A giant skeleton 18 feet tall. Now, again, I'm not trying to take things out of context to substantiate this or anything of the sort. I'm just saying, for those that say, oh, this is entirely impossible, not to those in the stream, I'm just saying in general, let's use some corroboratory pieces of evidence to not say that this particular article is reminiscent or directly related to that of what we were just reading, but rather it seems to indicate there's a there. You guys see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to say, oh my gosh, let's take a newspaper clipping and let's throw it together. No. That would be wrong of me in my opinion. But anyways, we see here, today there are many modern accounts from people who claim to have seen humanoid-type people whose skin and faces look like lizards and frogs with large protruding eyes. Jacob Bishop III, an investigator of the ET phenomenon, a pseudonym for his name, says that the reptilians are mostly much taller than humans and are cold-blooded like Earth reptiles. They appear to be far less emotionally sensitive than humans, and most have great difficulty expressing love, though they are extremely intelligent and have very advanced tech. I must say that it is an excellent description of the attitudes and behavior of the Brotherhood who control the world today. Okay, now again, we'll see here. The modern accounts of reptilians match the descriptions of many gods of the ancient world in the surviving texts and legends. Okay, so now, let's head on over back to the 31 planes. So, in these 31 planes, 11 realms are dominated by the 5 senses, which includes our own human realm, 6 other realms occupied by devas, and 4 realms of suffering, the lowest plane being hell, Niraya, and in ascending order, the animal world, the world of the Pita or hungry ghosts, and the world of the Asura. These are the planes of suffering, where there is no opportunity to gain merits. Unfortunately, these planes are the most populated, bursting at their seams with beings reaping the fruits of their past evil deeds. We must understand that in these 4 woeful planes, the most fearsome is hell, there being 8 major hells, 5 minor hells, and various sub-hells. In certain hell situations, there is no let-up of suffering for even one moment. Going beyond these 11 are another 16 realms of Deva. Okay, let's think of it like this. This concept of hell or negative energy or dense energy. Let's think of let's open up another thing of the toroid field here. Okay, let's say the toroid field. Oh, this is perfect. So let's say, guys, the toroid field, all right, man, represents that of what we're made of, you could say the planet Earth, all of that. What we find is that think of it like this. Instead of thinking of hell, or instead of thinking of it's a negative place, okay, because I think there's been a deliberate intent from the derivation of the Latin language to try and literally make it seem like this is some type of non-explainable, justifiable phenomenon, if you will. Think about if each line of this moving toroid field at the moment was, say, I don't know, a magnet, a nanochip, let's say, a memory card, whatever you want to refer to it as, right? Point being is that if you do any type of, for example, damage, effects, good or bad, okay, it's not about if you're going to be judged at that moment always per se. I think it comes down to that concept of karma via that of extremely astrally dense vibrational strings. So if we think of these lines as, again, nanochips, whatever you want to refer to it as, or computer chips, anything like this, and if the chips start to move to the bottom, by definition, as they fluctuate into the body of the field, they then need to project outwards, therefore creating the opposite of what was initially going inwards. So by definition, there needs to be reciprocation, as above so below, of the actions taken within this realm or density. And I would dare to say that it is not just within this one. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Some say that, where we are right now is the purgatory, no question about it, but it's hard to say, because it's very possible there may be other forms of that purgatory and other, again, we see here various sub-hells, if you want to call it. Now, going beyond these 11 are another, I hope that made sense to you guys, the concept of needing to replace one form of energy with another, that we can kind of give an example with using computer software or computer hardware chips. Going beyond these 11 are another 16 realms of devas and gods of various classifications. And finally, there are the 4 pure abodes of formless gods, where the lifespan is so long that it appears to be timeless. Because of this length of time, certain gods whose lifespans are much longer than others have the idea that they are immortal, having seen so many others coming and going, whilst they themselves are still around. The Buddha further said that these 31 planes of existence not only in this universe, not only in this universe, but are found amongst millions of other world systems or universes. Every system or world has its 31 planes of existence. Okay, now imagine, for example, if you were a species, like let's just say the alleged reptilian species that wanted to entrap, okay, the I guess you could say the Earth, if you will. What you would then have, or the solar, if you wanted to trap a species on one planet, you would need to, in my humble perspective, based on what I've been told and what I've been learning, that I can't fully say yet to the fullest extent, you would need to entrap the entire solar system of that vicinity, because it is like a full-on clock, just like, as they say, for example, hold on, sorry guys, let me draw this out, just so I don't have to keep using my hands, and hope you guys get this. Okay, we're going to go black. So, pretend... Okay, this is our solar system, right? Let's say we're going to go like this. I'm just saying for the sake of this example, the reptilians, they come in, they go, oh, we got all these planets, you know, all of a sudden we can create all of this and we can mess with them, right? All right, let's just assume that was the case. What you then have is the understanding of cymatics, concentric circles, right? And the understanding that geometry plays a large part of the universe, and that free will cannot be broken, but it could be bent. The soul cannot be destroyed, but it could be scalped. And so what you would then do is invert the concept of, via that of what physics and quantum physics through, by the way, give me 1 second here, that interestingly enough, the Biden administration just released with this report bringing quantum sensors to fruition seems to slowly but surely substantiate, except when they don't want to say anything too explicit, they just use the words quantum. They just keep saying quantum, quantum, sort of like consciousness, you know, just over and over again. What does it mean? Well, again, make of that as you will, right? So, point being, if we head back here, sorry, let me go back to the sketch pad. So if they come in and they see, for example, let's just say, Earth is us right here, let's just say randomly, they realize, because of, not that they even needed to figure this out, I would imagine this is something they knew before they even left their solar system, they needed to entrap a form, basically they needed to control the whole clock. They couldn't just go for Earth. There were too many unpredictable astrological, frequential, and harmonic oscillations that they needed to deal with before they could get to us. Hence why this would be a sort of long-form shaping operation. But again, if you have Stargate tech or advanced propulsion tech, as Eric Davis says here, you don't really have much of a problem jumping back and forth through time, if you will, right? So again, if we head back here, let's see. This unique universal truth was realized by the Buddha on his enlightenment 2,500 years ago. It is perhaps worth mentioning that only the Buddha was able to discover this unique truth through the process of a method or discipline known today as vipassana bhavana, or insight meditation. Thus far, no other religious teacher has been known to propound and teach this unique natural law. The Buddha further exhorted that to strive for the attainment of enlightenment should be the ultimate goal of his students and disciples. Many of his disciples were able to achieve enlightenment during his ministry, and one of the few notable ones, called Anuruddha, was able to confirm what the Buddha saw. Again, I can't help but think Anu, right? As we see here. So how many world systems are there in all? The early Buddhist text sometimes talks in the terms of the thousandfold world system, the twice thousandfold world system, and the thrice thousandfold world system. Okay, according to Buddha Gosa, there are trillion, billion world systems? Point being, what we see, by the way, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha and his enlightened disciples had witnessed what today science has just begun to discover, that there are other world systems, each with its life forms, as are found in this vast universe. Okay, now, again, going back to the concept of this. Now, think of this, so to speak, folks. This is our universe, right? Then you have, I don't know, say over here, you got our solar system, if you will. Then you have this solar system, right? And then you have, sorry, 1 second. Then you have another one, say, over here. Just going to put it off screen a little bit to give you guys some context, right? So then, say, for example, you are the reptilians and you go, holy crap, I want to, it's time to screw over this solar system. Why? Because we can. What you would need to then do is put something around our solar system via that of the light spectrum, so that the people, or the beings, the organic beings, the soul beings, if you will, within this entire solar system cannot ascend without facing some type of resistance, and even then, as time goes on, you put more layers over top, more, as they call, mind control grids, if you will. You put more and more layers, and the next thing you know, the whole place is shrouded in literally what we deem to perceive as space-time. That phase 1 seems to have been completed already by whatever whomever is doing this. Phase 2, I know it sounds a little bit silly, seems to be, but I don't think it is, seems to be pushing for, again, this metaverse type concept, and to insert yourself into a social hierarchical structure. You would need to understand the things that the people of that structure like the most. In this case, it's social media, in my opinion, I would dare to say. So we have this sort of trap metaverse grid, if you will. Then we have an attempt to put us into another one, which ironically enough speaks to the concept of the concentric circles, Now, here's what's interesting. Before we get back to this right over here about, the Nagas and the worship of the serpent and all of this, I want to jump right over to this right over here, Bibliotheca plates again, understanding the 5th dimension. But the reason why is because I want to show you guys this right here. Dimensional light, okay? If the 3D world is a hologram or illusion, we never are truly engaged in that dimensional field, but rather we are superimposed in that field like a shadow. Again, inversion. The inversion of the direction of mass consciousness propagates the result in which that subconsciousness is feeding to the I believe, to the microtubules of the brain that then disseminate what we're living under now without us even realizing, by definition. But we see here, this is the thing I wanted to point out. This, I would say, folks, is one of the things that really makes me think, okay? Please, 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 if you're on the stream, I encourage you guys to watch this right here. If we partake in each dimension like a shadow, what happens when we shine light on ourselves or the dimension? Science says that light exists in 2 states simultaneously: electromagnetic waves, okay, and a linear system of particles called photons. However, light is nothing more than an electromagnetic frequency or dimension that is temporarily interacting with another dimension, which is why it can have 2 states simultaneously. Light actually is able to exist in all dimensions simultaneously. However, this cannot be proved yet. Okay, before we go on, see this right here? Science says that light exists in 2 states simultaneously. EMF, electromagnetic waves, and a linear stream, meaning straight. Guys, look at this right here. Sorry. You see the anatomy of the human body of the Naga? Okay, let's go side by side. Electromagnetic waves, as we see here, waves, okay? Linear stream of particles, linear. There's a straight line going right through the waves. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Maybe I'm crazy. I'm not, again, I'm just, it seems to be something that signifies not just DNA, but everything, everything. Again, maybe even collapsing the wave within science, all of it. All of it, all of it. Let's see here. Let's see. I see. Yeah, I appreciate the comments, guys. Sorry, this is the first time I've checked in like 40 minutes. That's awesome. That's to all of you. Dan, word salad. Try not to make it one, my friend. So yeah, again, hopefully you guys can see what I'm trying to make a correlation to here, right? Because we have then the information structure side of it, and then we also have the visual side of it as well. So there's that. Now, we have here, again, duality, right? So that would be, in my opinion, the composition of us as a soul being, of that form of duality, right? You have the wave, you have the linear, the linear passage of what I would say information structure through the body. And then we're going to look here at, okay, the Dracon, Nephilim, Anunnaki, not for too long, because again, there's going to be more that we're going to be looking into. So we see here, for example, we're going to connect this back with science, by the way. So the Dracon menace, or at least they say pseudoscience, I should say. Are you afraid of reptiles? Almost everyone is afraid of some species of reptile. One may wonder why this is. Okay, we tend to cringe from spiders but not flies. Spiders are basically no more fearful or ugly in appearance than flies or many other acceptable insects. Perhaps the reptilian fear connects with our past and ET entities that have controlled us for so long. This is interesting. Okay, notice the extent to which serpents are used by us as symbols. For example, the medical association logos consisting of two coiled serpents refer to as the caduceus, and the dragons of royalty emblems, visualizing the imperial and royal court of the dragon sovereignty, not to mention the alignment of many ancient monuments with the Draco constellation, the dragon constellation. Again, why is it that the vast majority, if not all, pyramids point directly to the Orion constellation? I don't think I should not be the one to state definitively why or why not. Some say energy grid, transport Stargate, all of it, all of the above, healing system, all of it. Some further and positive examples of reptilian associations are that the Syrians use symbols to depict themselves, and this is why Noah received information about the ark from a serpent. The Kundalini energy at the base of the spine, described as a coiled serpent ready to strike and rising up the spine in a snake-like manner, aligning the chakras in enlightenment and activation of the 12-strand DNA. And then we have the Mayan Great Calendar, based on the ratio 1320. Serpent fangs regrow every 20 days, and there are 13 scales to a side in the diamond pattern of interlocking squares on the serpent's skin. Okay, the calendar aids the awakening serpent, Kundalini, and is an archetypal guide for transmutation and demonstrates that the future creates the present. Okay, the future creates the present. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Reminiscent of that of a toroid field coming in and out, fluctuating. Sort of like, again, the infinity symbol, so to speak, or maybe even like, maybe I'm pushing it a bit, but like the double helix, the serpent, the naga, right? Constantly going to and from, and it never, it stops at the heads of the snakes, but you know what I mean. If we go down this way, we just follow it back around, and it just keeps going up. So we see here... there are a few other basic laws that define your reality, and these only work in the first 3 dimensions. When we go to higher dimensions, we do not have all of the laws of physics that apply, which is exactly why there needed to be a butchering of even the confirmation or existence of it so long ago, and I'm sure it happened over and over again. And maybe I'm stepping a bit too far in saying this, but I would dare to say this alleged reptilian species would probably be responsible for that, if I'm being honest with you, or for ensuring that that was covered up completely. Now, this is what's also equally as interesting. What happens when our belief system is struck hard enough to crack the very grain of sand and rearrange the atomic structure? This sentence stuck out to me so avidly, folks, and I'll tell you why. 2 reasons. What happens when our belief system is struck hard enough? Belief system. Again, this to me reinforces the concept of our subconscious fueling whatever grid or matrix of a multitude of variables is over top of us. Okay, now if we head back to this right over here is struck hard enough to crack the very grain of sand and rearrange the atomic structure. This, maybe I'm over-interpreting too much. This speaks to me, ultimately, folks, as the structure of the atom as we perceive it with our eyes, or even, because again, we're viewing information structures with our eyes because it's light. By the time the light wave or the information structure goes to our eyes interpret it, read it, then send the signals to our brain. There's already a delay and a very slow process by definition within that. So, if we rearrange the atomic structure in a way that we could, for example, that it could, not rearrange. Viewing an atom with different forms of lenses or tools will show different significant properties of that atom or that atomic structure, so to speak, right? But what happens when one's mind, and I'm not trying to get overly woo or esoteric here, but one's mind realizes not I think, therefore I am, but I am, therefore I think. Therefore, you can manifest whatever you want to see. You can change the structure of that atom with your mind, which would corroborate what Don Phillips said about, how everything starts with an idea, which would corroborate our great friend of the show, Alexei Novitsky's concept of seed crystals, which would also corroborate the concept of cymatics and concentric circles, where, let me make a quick little visualization for you folks. Imagine this right here where green is. Imagine that's Earth, okay? And imagine, I'm just going to do black for the rest for the sake of time. There's other dimensions, planes, whatever you want to call it, outside of it. Unlimited, but I'm just going to keep it to this. Imagine we're living here. If we have an idea in our mind, assuming there's some connection relative to that of, again, the Naga and the serpent and the toroid field and all of this, the idea starts all the way up here. I'm going to just change the color to represent idea. Blue represents your idea. The idea starts here, and then it's got to work its way down into becoming reality. But as it works its way down, it only gets to your physical self once it is time for that to manifest. So I know that might sound quite complicated, but that's sort of like the question becomes, is that confined within the alleged energetic barrier within us, or is that just the principle of this simulation or life we live in, so to speak, right? Interdependent of other realms, planes, dimensions, you name it. Now, as the idea from the higher realms comes down into the physical, that would be the idea to manifest, again, what's being described, over here as rearranging the atomic structure. When one realizes that, again, I say this carefully, nothing per se is quote unquote real, it changes basically the whole thing, the whole ball game. But the thing is that enough of us subconsciously need to realize that globally. Now, to what number that is, I don't know. I think it's like anywhere from, they say 3 to 15% is all you need of any given population to within a particular vicinity to sort of crack that light barrier or any type of or any potential energetic traps placed over top you, right? Which would explain why here it says what happens when our belief system is struck hard enough to crack. Right? At least that's how I interpret it, so to speak. Okay, so this is interesting. The part of the galaxy you are in holds such duality. Even the nature of your being is in duality. You exist, yet you do not. Your spirit exists, yet you cannot see it. This is interesting because, again, that goes back to the concept of a cigarette, where when you burn when you light it, it starts to shorten because it's being burned, but at the same time it's staying lit, so you could smoke it, right? I think that's the best example I could give of both happening at once: destruction and manifestation, which again goes back to the concept of the Hermetic principles, as we know, as above, so below, and all of this. Now, this is interesting. We're going to go back to the R complex. So, actually, one little fun note here, allegedly. As a further point, channeling has indicated that our blood would be green if we did not utilize oxygen, but say if we utilize nitrogen instead, as some ETs do. Thus, our skin would be greenish, resembling the reptile color. We now know, again, there's many different forms of life. Once upon a time, about 1 million years ago, planet Earth was allegedly invaded by the Dracos, or the Dracons. Yes, this is spelled correctly, but you're right, it does relate to dragons, and presumably the origin of the term dragon. More specifically, Atlantis was menaced by the Dracon, and yes, there's little doubt that Atlantis was real, a large continent in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, again, let me also say, the point of this stream is not to look into Atlantis, but for those that may say, oh, come on, Dave, you believe it was real, as each day goes by, I'm more inclined to lean towards that, based on what I find in all of this. But anyways, and also because of what all of you have helped me with as well. So the Dracon came from Reptilian ET far within the galaxy and are now higher dimensional, not within our frequency spectrum. The original ancient race, this is interesting, consists of highly intelligent and benevolent beings, which are now said to be located in harmonic universe number 3, but we are in harmonic universe number 1. We can think of these universes in layers, that is tiered, but connected by portals like black holes or wormholes. Huh, you mean like this right over here? Like how Eric Davis talks about a wormhole? Right? Negative energy, we should probably refer to that as exotic energy. So this grid represents space and time. If you could bend light to the extent in which the information structure sits on it, or is made up of it, you can then create a sort of shortcut, if you will, right? So I know this is not anything new, so to speak, but let's get back to the whole Dracos thing. Again, so you would have this here residing within, again, let's stick with this drawing. Let's use red as the representation of a stargate, if you will. So notice that it's basically saying, let's just say, oh, the Dracos came in this way. Okay, so then they realized we got to set up a stargate here, and just keep on going in so we can just get in and out as we please, right? So again, we can think of these universes in layers, that is, tiered but connected by portals. Okay, I think we did a pretty good job of, visualizing that and drawing that out there. Let's see here. Now, as appears to be fairly common amongst many races, a digressive strain developed within this civilization. Digressive, not necessarily a nice one. The Dracon is the name given to this deviant strain, which separated from the dominant race of benevolent, nice beings. Presumably the Dracon were banished or simply left behind as the parent race ascended. This is not unusual. This would make sense because, again, the concept of ascension, if you're not coming with us, you're going to have to stay behind. That seems to be the concept of, allegedly, I say that carefully, what is happening now with respects to not just the ET affairs, but with people just realizing things in general, like, saying what's the purpose of this 9-to-5 job, just for me to go, look forward to just going out on the weekends, then repeat? Is that, the life that I want? And I say this in a good way. Because again, once you start thinking that, guys, in my humble opinion, going back here, now let's just re-envision this as the different dimensions and all that. Actually, we always were, sorry. The concept of an idea starting from here, and as you start to think, let me actually use yellow in this case. So pretend an idea starting here, all right, you start to realize, why am I doing this job? What's the point of this? And you start to think about, in general, the point of life. You start to question everything. You start to contemplate, not to sound cheesy, but mortality, immortality. As you do this, your physical body is here. The idea manifests closer and closer. And then, let's just say, for example, it keeps going, but then it stops here because you don't want to take, for example, I'm not saying you guys on the stream, I'm just saying in general, one would not want to take action on manifesting what they want. Whatever it is, you want to, I don't know, build a shed, whatever it is, right? Or change your life, or change jobs, or something like this. The moment you take physical action here, in the center of the green, in my humble opinion, is the moment that this manifestation gets closer to you in the physical. And the second, or the moment that it is time for the completion of your manifested idea to be fully in fruition, is when it hits physically. Boom. And that's sort of the way it kind of comes down. Now, these alleged Dracos, Reptilian, whatever you want to call it, they seem to be able to do that as well, except they also, just jump in and out using portal stargates. Some have even speculated that these Reptilians are strong enough spiritually and energetically to be able to create their own stargates, but that's not the point of this anyways. Let's get back to right over here. This group has caused the most disruptive contamination of the human DNA. We're speaking here of the group that allegedly was sort of left behind by the larger Dracon species as they continue to ascend, if you will. Amazingly, even Darwinism is in accord with the reptilian origin theory, and academics have recognized similarities between the reptilian brain and the human brain. The R complex, or the reptilian complex component in the brain, functions to give dinosaur-type traits, which is three main things: aggressive behavior, territorially oriented, and a need for social hierarchies. A need for, again, literally, I don't care what you say. Again, we'll just go right here. I am number one. Oh, geez. Sorry about that. I am number one. Screw you. This is the pyramid, right? You all fall below me. Again, make of that as you will. So, we see here, they are highly intelligent beings. Thus, the Dracon are reptilian race fragmented from the original civilization. Again, they're fractalized from their original, species. And I would dare to say that, assuming this is what's happening with our planet now in terms of ascendance and growth and things like this from a energetic, spiritual level, if you want to call it, the software level of things, as we say sometimes, there will be a chunk of us that will literally and metaphysically and metaphorically and all of the above stay behind, But you might be saying, Dave, okay, how is that possible to happen for them to stay behind and come with us? Again, the Hermetic principles, as above, so below. But then there would not be any type of attachment to us from that dissident group, because they would be the as below, we would be the as above. I'm just, throwing out ideas, right? But okay, so we see here, endowed, they are fragmented from the original civilization, endowed with a negative character and evil purposes due to a blocked heart center and inability to feel compassion for others. They're highly intelligent beings, upright in physical appearance, with warlike and aggressive natures, and they came to inhabit a star system in the Orion constellation. The ancient reptilians, in attempting to bring some organizations to this area of the galaxy, have become scattered throughout many systems and originally came to Earth 225 million years ago. We are now approaching a complete time cycle of this period, in which Earth's position is now in the same location spatially as it was in the galaxy 225 million years back. Thus, this is the start of a new stage in biological evolution. The name Draco has been used in literature for a planet in this Orion system, plus references to the Draconian Alliance and that these particular Orions wish to bring Earth under the Draconian Empire. To continue, about 1 million years ago, the Dracon came to Earth from Orion. They were expert geneticists and scientists and experimented with the human genetic code, creating hybrids. These hybrids are known as Dracos, a combination of human and Dracon traits achieved by contamination of the human genetic code. The Dracos consider Earth their birthright, and have been manipulating this planet to a large degree for about 500,000 years from underground. They're tall, around 7 feet, with human-looking bodies, but with scales and reptilian faces in addition to facial appearance. They also resemble the Dracon in temperament. Moreover, their overall appearance is more lizard-like than dragon. They're also called the Lizzies. It might be of interest to mention that the Dracon tampered with the DNA of the dinosaurs at this time, about 1 million years ago, which according to ET information were a creation from other ET experiments about 375 million years prior. So again, at this point in time, I mean, we can't, to be honest with you guys, I can't sit here and say, for example, of course, this is absolutely factual, but again, if we scroll down here, what I find peculiar is that note that most of the Dracon information here was obtained from extraordinary books, Voyagers, and all of this by Annie Haynes, transmitted from the Guardian Alliance, and she's not a channeler, or is not channeled. The result of these new experiments by the Dracon on the genetic code of the dinosaurs, into which their own genes were spliced with traits of an aggressive nature, was the creation of the carnivorous dinosaurs, for example, the Tyrannosaurus rex. These fearsome monsters, referred to as Dracon monitors, were used to subdue and control the human populations. Okay, I can see this as the dinosaurs being surveillance cameras, weapons, tools, if you will, because allegedly, this is what I say carefully, allegedly, this alleged galactic federation, this conglomerate of benevolent beings, use dolphins today, and their ability to, utilize sonar and all of this to communicate, and use dolphins as sort of surveillance cameras, tools, you name it. For those readers interested in satanic information, the Dracos possessed a genetic configuration known as the 666, a mutation imposed by the Elohim, advanced beings from higher universe dimensions, on certain species to prevent interbreeding. So again, before we go on, the advanced beings from higher universe dimensions, let's keep this in mind, higher universe dimensions. So let's think of these beings coming, say, let's use purple or pink, and again, cymatics, the concentric circles, seem to represent that as well, from higher dimensions coming in. All right, now if we think of, I think it was Lou Elizondo who said it best, if we think of a champagne glass, bubbles in a champagne glass, right? Think about this, and think about me just copying and pasting this image all over the screen. Bubbles in a champagne glass, right? A multitude of possibilities. So anyways, let's head back here. The 666 refers to disabling of the sixth overtone in each of strand 1, 5, and 6. That is 3 sixes for the 12-strand DNA description. Now the Dracon... Okay, hold on. The disabling of the sixth overtone. The sixth overtone, that's interesting. Anyways, now the Dracon and the hybrid Dracos also created the chupacabras that some readers will have read about in magazines and foreign newspapers recently, with claims of dinosaur-type appearances of these small human-sized lizard creatures. The genetic distortion of human DNA created by the Dracon threatened the continuation of the human species. With the assistance of the Anunnaki ETs from the star system Sirius A, plans were made to dispose of the Dracon problem on Earth. Note that this is not the Anunnaki resistance that is allegedly an ally of the Dracos. They devised a method for utilizing the power from the Earth's grid to destroy the underground habitats of the Dracos and the Dracons. The plan failed, creating an explosion within the Earth's crust, causing climactic upheavals, earthquakes, all of this. This resulted in a small global ice period lasting several thousands of years, causing unhealthy climactic effects and many humans to go underground, and the Dracos to leave or fail to survive, which would explain why we have this Agartha, all of this, potentially. I'm just, extrapolating here. Now we see, by the way, as a result, humans eventually returned to the surface and endeavored to rebuild their lives, but the interbreeding with the Dracon had contaminated the genetic lines. Several other ET groups that came to Earth exploited these negative circumstances to conduct further genetic experiments. As a result of the distorted human blueprint, some primitive man varieties were created and also more ape-like forms. Thus, on this basis, these particular species of primitive man and ape came from intelligent man and not the other way around. This sentence here, again, it makes me think of something that's a little deep, if you will, but instead of, I think, therefore I am, what if it's I am, therefore I think? It's just a thought. I'm not saying I'm right, but so what we'll see here is that in case of any confusion, one may wonder if the Dracos and Dracon came from the astronomically recognized constellation named Draco, not unless this is an amazing synchronicity. The pattern of stars of the Draco system is in fact a dragon, but these creatures' symbols and images for constellations normally have no significance. They are just a method of identifying stars, and they act as mnemonic. Now, humans were very vulnerable to being controlled. According to the Voyager's volumes, the civilization at that time consisted of Atlanteans, and Lemanians, or the Lemurians, which, due to the initial Dracos-Dracon DNA contamination, from which further mutations were created, the races fragmented and became warring. The Atlanteans began to disregard the law of one. Okay. Now, at this point, the Anunnaki... Now, by the way, I just want to say, this seems quite corroborative to what, again, individuals are being told off the record, let's just say, that will go public very soon, in my opinion. The Atlanteans began to disregard the law of one, and at this point, the Anunnaki, a race with reptilian traits and friendly with the Dracos, came to Earth bringing a creed that was a distortion of the law of one. The Anunnaki created teachings that would make them appear as gods to humans, promoting easier submissions. Their teachings were also designed to disempower women and to inhibit their resistance to the Anunnaki advances. The Anunnaki thus created a hybrid human Anunnaki who was referred to as the Nephilim around 950,000 years ago. Now, again, this is quite revealing, if you will, particularly if we, again, take seriously the alleged concept of human-alien hybrids at some point in time. This is also why, by the way, please forgive my profanity, I call this planet, if you will, a beautiful shit show, because there is organization, but it is not organized enough for, I think, the amount of energetic numbers to realize that there is some type of force pushing down on us, if that makes sense. There's not enough of us yet, but I think there will be, and I think there is. I think it's just a matter of sort of flipping that switch. Point being, okay, now, I just want to mention something very, very significant here, before getting back to the 31 planes. Now, this strain... let me actually just start from here. The most ET species have defined offshoots And the Anunnaki from Sirius A were no exception. The names of these advanced beings, Anunnaki, presumably derived from their king or god Anu. The Anunnaki lineage apparently goes back to the Elohim, who in turn are a digression from the Elohi, beings from a higher dimensional universe who very much oversee and monitor the human race's development. Now, this strain of spiritually deficit beings eventually inhabited the planet Nibiru. This planet has been written about by Zecharia Sitchin in his books and also channeled sources. It is allegedly larger than Jupiter and unexpectedly is a member of our own solar system. The reason I want to bring this up, folks, is because, again, there have been beings when they abducted humans. Again, granted, yes, I guess anecdotal stories, if you will. I guess that's one of the problems with abductions at this point in time. But some of these beings have claimed to be 2, 3, 4 million light years ahead of us, both technologically and spiritually, to the extent in which they observe even the Dracos, allegedly, and they hide in, or the Dracons, and they hide in dark matter. Again, replace the word dark or negative, if we go back to Eric Davis's report here, with exotic. Even my view changes a little bit, doesn't it? Right? So anyways, hold on, let's go down a little bit more here. Again, of course, we have the toroid field, generator of a dipole repulsive gravity or anti-gravity field through the center of the torus. Again, fractality. And believe it or not, by the way, doesn't this also remind us of see how this wraps around? I guess you could say it wraps around the larger tube here, if you will. Again, this reminds me, personally at least, of the way in which the double helix wraps around the chakras. So, let's see here. Let's scroll down a little bit. Oh, sorry, 1 second, guys. Also, I don't think it really helps either that this was sent to, again, these are just words to be fair, but they were sent to, for those that don't know, that may not know about this, 10 East Saturn Boulevard and 2 Draco Drive, Edwards Air Force Base. So, you know, and 6 Draco Drive as well, Edwards Air Force Base. So to those that say that, you know, symbolism and all that is nothing, I don't know. 10 East Saturn Boulevard, Edwards Air Force Base. I don't know. Make of that as you will. Let's see here. Great to see everybody in the chat, by the way. Greg, Anita, Paul, Michael. Great to see everybody. So let's go back up here. To be honest with you guys, I actually have moved a lot quicker than I had thought. Here we go. Okay, this is for nuclear. Sorry, guys. 1 second. There's certain things that I really want to say, and I'm really not trying to be a salesperson here or anything of the sort, but I can't, not just because the YouTube channel will get nicked, but for a few other reasons as well. Here we go. Experimental IEC device operating in the STAR mode at the University of Illinois Fusion Studies Laboratory around 1995. Okay, so what's interesting about this diagram here, about the electric power output and the way in which they describe this, I guess you could say this fusion direct energy converter device. I know I may be making a bit of a stretch here, seems to be similar to that of the planet Nibiru. Now, why do I say that? Well, let's actually, you know what? Let's look this up in real time. Let me just see. There was some footage I had that I shared with the members. We're talking, I think, 3 months ago at this point, roughly, where you could see a satellite from a very long distance satellite. You could see some type of The problem is I don't even know what to type in. Sorry, guys. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that let me draw it out for you real quick. So, let's say, this is Earth, okay, right over here. This is Earth, and the satellite, we're looking at bird's eye view, and from above. Well, I guess depending what above is, because it's relative in space, but we see here, this is Earth, and what ends up happening is there's some massive wave of energy that seems to open up in this particular footage. I will get it for you guys. The members have it, but I on the Telegram, but I don't, it's so far back, I don't want to keep scrolling and scrolling. And we can see what seemed to be I think, what's the, hold on. What does the planet Nibiru look like, or allegedly? On the satellite showed exactly that. It showed, what looked to be Ezekiel's wheel. My bad, guys. It looked like this from the satellite. And again, do we think it's a coincidence that it seems to be all over the place? Maybe not. I mean, I'm not sure. Right? Again, a bunch of these beings coming through a sort of a square portal, which science would be able to substantiate quite heavily. And also it seems as though that Ezekiel's wheel seems to be reminiscent of the Project Looking Glass concept. And if we can do that, see, events that happened in a certain, geographical vicinity, and not just with, like, separate of that of space and time, a super advanced form of remote viewing or something like this, then my gosh, I can't imagine what these vastly superior, whether spiritually or technologically, beings can do. Now, here we go. Ezekiel's 4 wheels within a wheel. When the 4 living beings moved, this is interesting. Hold on, let's check this out. The wheels moved, and when they stopped moving, the wheels stopped. When they rose up from the ground, the wheels rose up from the ground. The wheels rose up beside them. Huh. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 16. All 4 wheels looked alike. Their structure was like a wheel within a wheel. Huh, that also reminds us again of the concentric circles. I can't help but think of, the toroid field. Point being, I'm not going to go through this because it's from the Biden administration, not because it's from the Biden administration, but bringing quantum sensors to fruition. It's basically, can I be honest with you guys? I think it's slapping us in the face. It's basically reintroducing to us something that we already have within us and essentially trying to reshape it to us, in my opinion. So, again, and then we have here, qualiacomputing.com, the hyperbolic geometry of DMT experiences, symmetries, sheets, and saddled scenes. Now, this is why at the end of today's stream title, I put ELVES with a question mark and exclamation mark, because it's not for me to say whether these ELVES, if you will, are true, I guess you could say, organic beings, soul beings, if they're a manifestation of the subconscious, or, which I don't, at the moment at least, think they are, or if they're also thought forms, if you want to call it. Now, there is something I did want to bring up, by the way, thanks to a friend of the, actually a member of the Patreon, Lewis, and it's something called, let's see here, neurological form constants. They're symbols, I'm just reading from my notes here, symbols entrenched within the subconscious to mess with the mind. Okay, and it uses social memory complexes from the brain, which we can argue are information structures. Now, we see here, let's jump right over to, okay, this right here, I've highlighted it so we can all see. The concrete hypothesis is that the network of subjective measurements of distances we experience on DMT, coming from the relationships between the phenomenal objects one experiences in that state, has an overall geometry that can be accurately described as hyperbolic, or hyperbolic-like. In other words, you'll see where I'm going with this, guys. Our inner 3D 1T world grows larger than is possible to fit in an experiential field with the 3D Euclidean phenomenal space. This results in phenomenal spaces, surface, and objects acquiring a mean negative curvature. Of note, by the way, I'll translate this, so to speak, if some of you guys are like, what the heck? Of note is that even though DMT produces this effect in the most consistent and intense way, the effect is also present in states of consciousness induced by tryptamines, and to a lesser extent in those induced by all other psychedelics. Now, what's interesting about this is that if we look here at hyperbolic geometry, okay, perhaps the clearest way to describe hyperbolic space is to show examples of it. This is what I was saying when I meant, like, what we just read through is this right over here, visually. I know it's kind of weird to envision, but think of the space-time grid and the light spectrum, us existing on this type of wave, if you want to call it. All right. Now, we can only remember what we can reconstruct. That makes sense. Okay. Projections into more familiar geometries, things like this. Again, fractals. We think of the way we think is even fractalized as well, not in a bad way. But again, what about DMT suggests hyperbolic geometry? The use of terms like mind expanding and warping. to describe the effects of the drug are very common. It's interesting because it's, again, representative of that of space, where there's the concept of the quarks and tensors, so to speak, like an elastic band. It expands, then compresses. But not only this, one thing I also wanted to point out too was this right over here, EliteLearning.com. This was 3 years ago. Neuroception, a subconscious system for detecting threat and safety. I'd like to thank Lewis from our Patreon for pointing this out to me. Okay, the theme is that we don't have to think we are scared, but our bodies act scared. So what we see here is that our nervous system is constantly taking in sensory information from both the external and internally from inside our bodies. Okay, again, we're processing information structures. Okay, now what we'll find here is that the detection of a person as safe or dangerous, an environment is safe or dangerous, or even the internal state of our body as safe or dangerous triggers neurobiologically determined pro-social or defensive behaviors. See, I think this by definition, all due respect to EliteLearning.com, is flawed irrespective to that of defining what we are. We need to understand who we are and where we're from to the farthest metric or extent that we can before conclusively stating this, because notice that these dangerous triggers have, again, determined pro-social or defensive behaviors. I cannot help but think, all due respect, what if that is from, sorry, hold on. Is this from, here we go. The R complex, the reptilian complex, aggressive behavior, territorially oriented, and a need for social hierarchies. I just can't help think that there's a correlation there because of the basis on which there's study on us currently, which we can argue we are hybrids in a particular regard. Okay? Now, what we'll see here is that neurologically, to develop social bonds, and you'll see why I'm bringing this up, our autonomic nervous system must actively inhibit our more primitive defense systems. Again, there seem to have been, within the hybridization of what created us and maybe even other branches that maybe look like us, but the DNA is slightly different, that is, junk DNA, as they say, which is why maybe we never look into it publicly, at least. Point being is that notice the concept of us resorting to our basic instincts, mannerisms, gut feelings, when we're trying to develop a social bond. That, going back to the basic instinct of things, in a way, I don't mind, because again, if we're made that way, so be it. But the point is that we need to be conscious and aware of that as we're forming social bonds with people and structures, not just people, but structures as we begin to move forward. Why do I say that? Because that hybridization of the R complex gave within us our primitive, I guess you could say, focal point of aggressiveness. We're way too aggressive in our primitive instincts of things, if that makes sense. I mean, that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's see here. So if we head on back to Bibliotheca Plates, we're gonna see here the Serpent God. Okay, let's see here if we go down. All right, here we are. So, perfect. Let's zoom in a little bit. This gives, by the way, the manifestation or elves or something of the sort, of elves, not or elves, of elves that seem to embody, and I'm not saying all of them, but seem to embody a reptilian type control. And I say reptilian not because I want them to be the species that isn't controlling some of these elves that seem to give certain people negative experiences. I'm not talking about the positive ones. That, I mean, have at it, guys. Seriously, it's not for me to say. However, when we take a look at the influence of people that have interacted with what's been called negative elves, or beings or entities or thought forms of the sort within when they're on drugs or something like this, or when they're on psychedelics, there seems to be a control system that is detailed within, again, neurological form constants, taking advantage of our primitive biology of, in order to develop social bonds, we need to get back to our primitive defense systems. I don't know. It's just, I'm just exploring ideas, guys. Let me be clear. I'm not saying I hold the answer to all of it and yada yada. Point being is that, again, DMT suggests hyperbolic geometry. I haven't done DMT. I've done shrooms, as I think the vast majority of you know. Did a stream last summer where I was doing a stream on shrooms. Didn't really last as long as I'd hoped. But point being is that you see these types of shapes. You see these types of shapes when you're on psychedelics. Again, depending on the strain you take, depending on the amount and all of this, your tolerance and what have you, I get it. But point being is that if we head back here, there are 3 suggested origins for the Anunnaki reptilian intervention in human affairs. They're ETs, they are interterrestrials who live within the Earth, they manipulate humanity from another dimension by possessing human bodies. I'm going to go with all of the above because there's evidence for all of it, in my humble opinion. If we parallel that directly with Eric Davis's work of, again, just his work in general, so to speak, the science seems to be there. Okay, now we see, sorry, let me go back here. So what we'll find is that we have extraterrestrials versus interterrestrials. Now, here we go. A Hopi Indian legend says that a very ancient tunnel complex exists under Los Angeles, and this, they say, was occupied by a lizard race some 5,000 years ago. In 1933, G. Warren Shufeldt, an LA mining engineer, claimed to have found it. Today, it is said, some malevolent Freemasonic rituals are held in this tunnel complex. There has been a massive cover-up by the authorities of the existence of these subterranean races and where they live. In 1909, a subterranean city, which was built with the precision of the Great Pyramid, was found by G.E. Kincaid near the Grand Canyon in Arizona. It was big enough to accommodate 50,000 people, and mummified bodies were on the site. Mummified bodies found on the site were of Oriental or possibly Egyptian origin, according to the expedition leader, Professor S.A. Jordan. Okay, numerous artifacts were found, including copper implements as hard as steel. Okay, the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. has ensured these finds remain unknown to the public, and that's its job, and no one would have known about this discovery had it not been for 2 articles in a local newspaper, the Arizona Gazette, in April 1909, just like, by the way, guys, this article right over here, July 11th, 1919. A giant skeleton 18 feet tall. I'll read the text very quickly. June 14th, if the report that the fossilized skeleton of a giant 18 feet tall has been found near Seymour, Texas is true, it is the most important ethnological discovery ever made in the world, remarked Dr. J.E. Pierce, professor of anthropology of the University of Texas. Quote, it would break all previous records of giants by nearly 10 feet, as the tallest man known to anthropological research was only 8 feet 5 inches in height. Do you see how this could have broken, the paradigm of the belief system and all of that? Again, let's see here. Mr. McKinney, while making an excavation on the narrow watershed between the Brazos and Wichita rivers, came upon the fossilized skeleton near the surface. Okay, Mr. Kinney writes, quote, I estimate that this man weighed from 2,000 to 2,500 pounds. According to my deductions, he lived about 2,800 years ago. The skull is 6 times the size of that of an ordinary man. Now, for example, let's go here from Matteo Ianio, an Italian researcher who claims that he's found some entrances in Antarctica. Again, we're just trying to, bring it all together, so to speak, in terms of the existence of these beings. And if they do exist, I would imagine they would probably exist over here. Let's see over here. Then, of course, we have the alleged Hanabu, the German Nazi stuff that, obviously that's much more into modern human history today. By the way, if all of this was covered up by various factions of beings, I mean, the amount of history on this planet is probably unfathomable, truly. And that's just on this planet. So anyways, then of course we have the alleged, Nazi craft as well. But then there's this right over here that I wanted to point out so significantly. This was stated by German Navy Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, 1943. The German submarine fleet is proud of having built for the Führer in another part of the world a Shangri-La on land, an impregnable fortress. I don't think Navy Grand Admiral Karl Donitz was referring to the bunker in Munich, where Hitler allegedly shot himself. So, yeah. So with that being said, everybody, I want to thank you guys so much, truly, for coming out for this stream. As I said earlier, unfortunately, I'm on a little bit of a time frame this time around. We will have in just over 30 minutes from now, we will be having a group Zoom call. If you are on patreon.com/GenerationZ, you're more than welcome to sign up and join us if you like. We go for 2-3 hours. We cover a multitude of things. With that being said, though, guys, thank you so much. I hope I didn't go too quickly, but we will catch all of you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.